Good morning. Welcome to NASA headquarters in the Commercial Crew Planning Status Forum. The purpose of this forum is to continue the dialogue between NASA and industry regarding the plans for a commercial crew initiative. You may be wondering what's different about this forum. Well, in addition to the information we will present today, we have dedicated at least 30 minutes to address questions from either the audience here in the auditorium or from those watching online. For those watching this program on either NASA TV or webcast, you can submit questions online for an additional 2 hours after the conclusion of today's forum. We will attempt to address your questions, and we plan to post the questions and answers on NASA's Exploration website. Here's how viewers can submit questions online to the panel. The web address is www.nasa.gov/exploration/comments. And for those who want to download the slides you're about to see in the presentations, they can be found at www.nasa.gov/exploration. Now, we do have a little bit of a disclaimer here. Yeah. This isn't like cops or anything. The information presented today represents the results of our planning efforts to date. However, this information is not meant to represent the final plans. As a result of future planning, guidance from the administration and Congress, and input from you, we may alter some of the plans presented today. Now that we have the housekeeping chores out of the way, it's my pleasure to present the Deputy Associate Administrator for Exploration Mission Systems Mission Directorate, Dr. Lori Leshin.
Thanks, Mike. Good morning, everybody. It's good to see everybody here. Thrilled to be here on behalf of Doug Cook and the rest of the folks in ESMD and really across the agency that are so excited to bring this community together to have the discussions that you all are going to have today and to give you an update of all the hard work that these folks and many, many others who aren't up here with them have been doing in preparation for this activity. It's a very interesting time at NASA, of course. Big change, I think, gives us an opportunity to really sit back and reflect a bit on why we're here. What are we about? What are we as a space exploration community really all about? And we've actually been doing that internally. We've been having some of those conversations. It's been a very exciting moment to be able to pause and reflect and think about that as we go forward. And you know, why are we here? Well, you know, there are many reasons as a space exploration community we could come up with that we are here to drive prosperity in our nation through innovation and scientific discovery. We are here to do cutting-edge research. We are here to ensure that humans have a sustained presence in deep space as we move forward as a planet. And really, we in exploration have focused quite a lot on that last phrase, making sure that humans have a sustained presence in deep space as we move forward. And what does that mean? What does that mean about NASA's role? What's NASA's role in that? How do we actually enable that and make that happen? And what it means is we've got to be innovative in our approaches. And this program that we're about to talk about today is part and parcel to making that happen. It means that we, NASA, have to re-examine what has been our traditional identity almost, our traditional role, and think about our role in a new way as catalysts of a much broader and more inclusive activity. And to me, that's one of the things that's the most exciting about this program. So I'm thrilled that you all are here to partake with us in that conversation. This program, I want to emphasize that we remain incredibly committed to this program, and we intend to see it through. And what you're going to hear about today are innovative approaches to getting humans to low Earth orbit. You're going to hear about how we want this program to be a partnership between NASA and the private sector, which means we both have a stake in its success and that we, in many ways, co-create that program, which is what this forum is all about. We want you to know, as Michael said in his disclaimer, that this is still a work in progress, and part of our commitment to partnership with you is to not stand behind closed doors till it's all done and then throw the plan out there, but to, in fact, interact with you in the creation of that plan. And again, as I get off the stage, just to emphasize how much excitement there is around the agency with all the folks that have been working on this about the opportunities and possibilities here. We all see this as truly game-changing for the future of our space program as a new way of getting humans to low Earth orbit, as an access to station initially, but really as a way to broaden access to space beyond what we've traditionally been able to do. So it's a very exciting time. We thank you again for your participation, and we look forward to telling you where we are and hearing your feedback and interacting with you on questions. So thanks so much for coming. Oh, but sorry. And my last job is to actually introduce Phil McAllister, who has been doing an able job of leading the planning effort here from headquarters, although I see, all the center guys have practically pushed him off the table here, but we're getting used to that here at headquarters. So Phil's gonna get the panel kicked off.
Thanks, Lori. Good morning, everybody. I'm glad to see so many people here in the auditorium, and also welcome to those that are online and watching on NASA TV. My name's Phil McAllister. I am going to spend a few minutes on an overview of the Commercial Crew Initiative. I know everybody is very eager to hear the details of what we have been planning over the last couple months, and we have plenty of time to do that. So I'm going to just spend a few minutes on sort of the strategic purpose and objectives of the program at a top level. So next slide, please. These are the things I'm going to touch on. I want to start with our vision of the future, of where we are going, hopefully, with this program. Talk a little bit about the purpose and the framework that we are using to put this initiative together, some of the features of our strategy, and thoughts about our baseline planning assumptions associated with the program. Next slide. Okay, when we started our planning effort, really back in February and March, we really felt like it was important to define and agree on where we were going with this program in terms of our future state. So our vision is to have a robust commercial human space transportation system with multiple providers, multiple customers, representing a variety of segments of the population, as well as purposes for that transportation to low Earth orbit. And you can see we created this graphic to sort of envision that or embody that. We have very routine operations with airplanes and aviation transportation today. We would like to get to a point where we were on a much more routine basis for human spaceflight. And then key to NASA, obviously, is getting our crew up and down to the International Space Station. So we have the space station icon in the upper right. And we really feel like that really does embody what we're trying to create here as a program for our future state. We believe this future is going to be beneficial not only for NASA, but also for the nation and for the other customers that we see for this service. We have been talking about routine human access to space for decades now, and I truly believe that this Commercial Crew Initiative will be the next major step to accomplishing what we've been talking about for so many decades. Next slide, please. Okay, a little bit about our objectives. That's obviously a key statement from which everything flows. We are trying to meet the needs of NASA and the nation for human spaceflight services, so we came up with this objective to drive our planning. It is to facilitate. This is for the demonstration phase primarily, where we were developing and demonstrating these capabilities, investing in the development of this crew transportation system capable of achieving safe, reliable, and cost-effective space transportation. You'll probably hear me say that several times. Safe, reliable, cost-effective space transportation, human space transportation. That's what we're trying to accomplish. To low Earth orbit and the ISS. Once this capability is matured, we hope to be a reliable near-term customer for these services here at NASA. So in order to meet these objectives, we're going to be following, as Lori said, an innovative way of partnering with the private sector in a hopefully public-private partnership that's going to feature these sort of strategic goals. We really want to use pre-negotiated milestone-based agreements that support the development, testing, and demonstration of multiple systems. We want a broad range of systems in our portfolio. As an investor, that's kind of the way we look at this. As an investor, you'd like to have diversity in your portfolio, and that's what we'd like to achieve also with this program. We are looking for an end-to-end solution at the end of this. Some amount of industry investment capital. This is a key feature. We definitely want skin in the game on the part of the partners. We feel like that incentivizes performance. It really aligns our goals so that we are on board along with our partner in trying to realize the objectives. We definitely want to have NASA human spaceflight certification, or human rating, as we have referred to it in the past. And we definitely are partnering with the FAA. We've had a lot of initial discussions, and we hope that partnership will get stronger going forward. So as you see, key to this frame, I'm sorry, that's on the next slide. I got ahead of myself here. So these are kind of the objectives and the approach that we're trying to put in place. There is some risk associated with this approach, and there is no guarantee of success. But if we are successful, and we're going to make every effort to do that, we do believe that there are some significant benefits to NASA, strengthening the ISS program, giving us an additional U.S. capability to get our crew to and from space station, attracting other space markets, hopefully reducing the cost of space transportation in the future. So lots of benefits if we are successful. Next slide. So how are we going to do that? What is the framework that we are going to put in place to accomplish these goals? And you can see that we want two things. We primarily need and want our crew to and from space station. We need that capability to get our crew up and down to space station. We have the Soyuz. We're going to be using that for many years. We would certainly like to have that capability as a U.S. Capability going forward. And we also want to support the development, as I've said, for other customers for the human space transportation to and from low Earth orbit. We're trying to achieve both of these goals, not one at the expense of the other. So this framework really needs to accommodate a diverse range of potential passengers. We are not talking only about billionaires, but researchers and scientists from all walks of life, and hopefully in a variety of technical disciplines that will be able to leverage these services, as well as our astronauts from other countries, potentially human spaceflight participants, a broad range of individuals we hope to be able to leverage this service. Again, we want to support a multiple range of commercial systems. We want to provide high-level goals in terms of the performance of these systems, high-level goals, and allow maximum innovation. Again, maximum flexibility, maximum discretion on the part of the commercial partner to come up with innovative solutions. In terms of human rating, and that's what most of the panel will spend talking about today, we do have absolute things that we need to have to get that human rating certification, human spaceflight certification. But in terms of what we're trying to accomplish for performance, we're going to try and keep that as high level as possible, again, allowing maximum innovation on the part of the private sector. And you can see some of the other features as we go forward. Key to this framework is that there are other customers for this service, and there are several positive indicators that make us feel that there are potentially a lot of customers for this service. It is not NASA's job. We do not see it as NASA's job to close anybody's particular business case, but we do have as a fundamental feature or assumption that there will be other customers. And looking historically over the last 30 years since 1978, both Russia and the United States have launched astronauts from other countries into low Earth orbit. It's been about 100 since we've started, which averages about 3 a year. There's also been, since 2001, 8 spaceflight participants plus 1 reflight of a spaceflight participant, which averages about 1 a year. So that's real historical demand that you can point to that shows that there are other customers for this service. There's been also numerous market studies that potentially show a very robust demand for this, as well as another positive indicator is Bigelow Aerospace's activities. Bigelow Aerospace has spent a reported $180 million on their inflatable modules. They anticipate very robust demand, potentially as many as 100 flights by the end of the decade. So all these are very, very positive indicators, as well as the recent CC Dev, or Commercial Crew Development activities, that NASA awarded back in February. We received over 30 proposals from U.S. aerospace industry providing or proposing to provide capabilities and systems for commercial crews. So there's a very strong interest on the part of industry, most of which is represented here, to supply the services for this capability. But most important, in my mind, the key ingredient that made this program feasible, in my mind, was the decision on the part of the administration to extend the life of the space station, likely to 2020 or beyond. In my mind, the space station market provides, for the first time in history, a sustainable, reliable customer for crew transportation services to low Earth orbit. That was a key ingredient that made this initiative, in my opinion, feasible. Next slide, please. Okay, so some of the attributes that we are looking to try and achieve with this program. We have not come up with a specific acquisition strategy, so if you're looking for details on that today, we are not going to provide those. That's a disclaimer right up front. But we are working that very, very hard and hope to have an answer soon on that. But we have not finalized our acquisition strategy or the timing associated with that acquisition strategy. But some of the features that we would like to get out of this, well, this print is even small for me, so I'm sure it's small for you guys in the audience. We are leveraging the lessons learned from some of our previous programs, including the COTS program, which is the Commercial Orbital Transportation Services program, as well as some of our previous human spaceflight endeavors like the Orbital Spaceplane and Constellation, which is still ongoing. And we have identified some key attributes of what we want our relationship to encompass with the private industry. As I mentioned, performance-based milestones. We want a fixed government investment because we believe that that incorporates a discipline that we would like to see, a cost-effectiveness discipline that is key to our strategy. We want industry investment, and we feel like a lot of these features are synergistic. If the industry has skin in the game, that's going to incentivize them to find other customers, incentivize them for performance. We definitely want competition. That is, again, you'll hear me say that in the future, that is a key aspect to our strategy. We need multiple providers that are coming forward with innovative solutions. And hopefully, at the end, have more than one service provider that we can use for purchasing services at the end. Next slide, please. So in terms of our assumptions, what is the baseline program that we are putting forward? As part of the President's budget request in February, there was $5.8 billion to accomplish the development program, the development part of this program. So you can see at the upper, sort of the row on the right, or the top, we've got the development, ending, and demonstration flights. That's the 5-year program that the $5.8 billion was allocated to. And then once successful, once these systems are mature and achieve their human spaceflight certification, we do anticipate contracting with those companies for missions out beyond 2016 for services. That is what the program baseline assumption are. Again, we are using a non-traditional approach, and when we look at inputs that we have received from industry in terms of previous estimates that they have had, both to NASA and to the Augustine Committee as well as others, we believe that we could fund up to 4 providers with that $5.8 billion, and that is a key aspect to our strategy going forward, because competition, again, incentivizes performance, supports cost effectiveness, and does not make NASA dependent on a single provider. This is going to be a challenging program for both NASA and the private sector, and if somebody stumbles along the way, we would like to have other providers that are hopefully we can rely on. Baseline plan reflects a very success-oriented, that's our phrase that we came up with, very challenging schedule of achieving sort of initial operating capability by 2015 and then services shortly thereafter. And of course, there is a lot of discussion here in DC and throughout the nation on what this program is going to be going forward. So if required, we are going to adjust our program, our plans rather, for whatever laws get passed by the Congress, future administration direction, input from you guys. We are going to adjust if necessary, but this is sort of the baseline program that we are putting forward today. Okay, with that, we're going to go, I do have a summary slide. Next slide. I think I've said most of this stuff before, leveraging lessons learned that we have developed over 50 years of human spaceflight, trying to meet both objectives of ISS crew transportation as well as enable the growth of commercial human spaceflight industry and all the future benefits that we hope when we are successful. Safe, reliable, cost-effective crew transportation to ISS, free our limited resources so that we can really go beyond LEO, reduce our reliance on foreign systems, and potentially lower the cost of access to space. That is what we were trying to accomplish. Lots of good benefits there. So with that, I am done, and I'm going to move over to our panel session, which are going to give you, you're probably going to feel a little whiplash right now because I'm at the 10,000-foot level, and we're about to go at about the 10-foot level, some of the very technical details that we have developed over the last few months. We're going to start with Ed Mango, who is my new best friend. Ed and I talk very regularly over the last few months. He is my counterpart at KSC, leading the planning efforts at the Kennedy Space Center, which has been named as the lead center for the Commercial Crew Initiative. Next up will be Scott Thurston, who has been our key point person on the Insight and Oversight approach that we're putting together. That is a very fundamental and unique and innovative approach, and Scott is going to be giving you some details on that. And then Brett Jett from the Johnson Space Flight Center. He is serving as the deputy for the planning effort. JSC was named as the deputy lead center for this initiative, and Brent has been really key in providing that JSC experience as well as the crew office experience and perspective, which has been very beneficial to the development of our plans going forward. Maria Kalura has been helping Ed and the team down there at KSC. She's going to be talking primarily about other key aspects of the program. Let's see, Ed's going to be talking mostly about the RFI themes that we heard and some of our responses. As I mentioned, Scott's going to be talking Inside Oversight. Brent really covering most of the requirements and standards and how we're dealing with that. And Maria, some of the other key topics that we heard from the RFI. And also here at the panel, who we brought up to take any questions that you might have, is Alan Lindenmoyer, the program manager for the current COTS effort, the Commercial Orbital Space Transportation effort, focusing on the cargo system. And Alan is bringing his team and their experiences to bear because, as you can see, our program is very analogous to the COTS program, and we're trying to leverage those lessons learned that his team, Alan and his team, have learned over the last 5 years. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ed, who will start the panel session. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. I am Ed Mango, and it's very good here to be in D.C. today, and I want to thank all of you for being here and all those that would be on the web. Also, thank you for participating in this endeavor. What we're trying to build here is a partnership, and in order to do that, we got to be able to communicate, and I think that's what we're trying to do with this particular exercise today. It's also a very good day to be part of a commercial crew. I think the biggest part of that is I'm part of a team that is multi-centered, with experiences from various backgrounds, and together we're going to go try to put this thing together. And I'm just happy and honored to be part of a team of very smart people. Let's see what we want to talk about from an agenda standpoint on our first chart. Is we heard you all in the RFI we put out a couple months ago, and we're going to talk about the process we did in terms of understanding what that RFI responses had to say back to us. We're going to look at common themes, and then we're going to talk about some of those common themes and how we plan to address those specific things. You're not going to hear about all the responses back from the RFI today because there just isn't enough time, but also we want to hit the ones that are most important to the overall development of commercial crew. And those results back from the NASA, from you all through the NASA feedback, is our programmatic approach. And so we'll go through that a little bit, and we'll also go through the Inside Oversight approach, really looking at what's the roles of the Insight team and how we hope that they will work together with the providers and our partners, and the role of the Oversight team to make sure that it's not too much. We'll also talk a little bit about technical requirements and the technical standards. We highlighted the technical standards a lot in the RFI, and we will talk about that. Also, our initial path to failure tolerance. I think it's a new and unique path to how to deal with that particular part of the requirements. We'll also talk about how we plan from a top level, get through certification and get into a flight regime and making sure we're safe to fly each flight. We'll talk a little bit about reliability. All those comments were really from the RFI. We're talking about a few other things, that is the facility usage and how we can use other NASA facilities, how you all can use other NASA capabilities throughout the agency in order to get this capability on the ground and going. Talk about a little bit about our concept of ops and then our roadmap ahead over the next number of months. Next chart. See, the effort started back in May. A lot of work was done by the folks in Houston. to put together the baseline of a RFI that went out in May. We were very much a part of that discussion that went out. We put it out in order to get feedback, and we definitely got feedback, which is very good. Part of the key part of that discussion was something that we call the CHIRP, which is the Commercial Human Rating Plan. In that plan was our first attempt to say, hey, this is what we're thinking about how to human rate a capability in a system. It was tailored from 8705, which is a NASA internal document that says, here's what we need to do to be human rated. That is really driven towards certain NASA programs, so it has to be tailored, and we tried to do that throughout the CHIRP process. We also talked about various types of requirements, type 1, 2, and 3s, and that's what we also talked about in an RFI. We said in the future we're going to give more information about what we call an SRD, a service requirements document, back to ISS. That is, what do we need to do in order to supply an ISS capability when that becomes necessary, and also the key interface document between this system and, of course, the ISS. Those are going to be future releases, and they still will be future releases in a format that we all will accept. There'll be, so far we got 35 responses back from industry. We've looked at all those. What we did in order to adjust that, it wasn't just a planning office that reviewed all those. We ended up setting up a NASA-wide team to go look at all those responses and say, what do they mean to the various different entities within NASA? And we put together basically our response to the responses. We've also been sharing that very much with the FAA. The next two charts, and I'm not going to go through the details in the next two charts because they really are saying, here's all the themes we heard. So if you can go to the next chart. All the themes we heard are everything on this list. The things that are in blue are the things we're going to talk about today. So you can see that there are some things that we're really not going to address in this particular forum, and we probably, and most likely, we will address through other methods in future forums and future communications that we have. We thought that by addressing the ones in blue, we are highlighting the most important things we got back from the RFI and from the themes that we were able to capture. Our next chart. There is one section on here that talks about acquisition. You're not going to hear a lot of words about acquisition today, so if you're expecting that, we want to set those expectations. What we very much are working on that, and when we work through those details within NASA and then within the government, then we'll be glad to share those with the community. So getting into some of the details on our next chart, the programmatic approach. What we heard from the CHIRP, or from the RFI, and what the CHIRP talked about was an approach for the program that probably needed another refinement from where it was within the CHIRP. And that's what we wanted to see. What was that refinement expected to be from industry and also from internal? So we did a number of internal reviews. We also looked at all the feedback we got from the partners through the RFI. And what we basically are coming back with is we believe that there needs to be a number of statements about program control. So these are those basic statements. We believe that this program, the Crew Commercial Program, when it is established, and this initiative and the program that supports that initiative, is required and will manage the requirements that are governing the certification for the crew transportation system. That is the crux of what this program is trying to accomplish. It is the fact that we need to manage those requirements as well as manage the risks to those requirements. That is the job of the program, and that will be the single interface of the purpose of the program. You can look at the crew transportation certification as really our human rating requirements. That's a slang term for saying we need to have a certified system in order to go put our crew on board that vehicle to go fly it. In addition, we want to streamline the oversight and control approach. What we don't want to do is have continuous oversight, continuous discussions in which the government is constantly telling our partners which way to go. We really want this to be a partnership where the provider is really driving the boat on their design, and we are helping them. We are partnering with them to do that. All the programs have a goal of minimizing boards and panels. I've heard that throughout my entire NASA career. Well, we're going to say it again. But in this particular approach, because our approach is different, we think we have a very good chance of trying to minimize the number of boards and panels. We're trying to get to the point where we really have one interface that's going to make any kind of decisions and direction between the partners and the government and NASA. Again, this is trying to push this partnership that says if we keep it at a high level, then the partners can deal with the details that have to go on within their design. Next, we want to talk about the interfaces between NASA and its technical authorities. NASA has an outstanding governance organization system that very much talks about how we deal with our engineering partners, our safety partners, and our health and medical partners. What we want to do is make sure that that relationship is well established and very clear between what the program needs, what the tech authority will be giving us, and what we will be giving the partners as we go forward. The tech authorities will be giving recommendations to the program. That is their purpose. Their purpose is to tell the program, here are the risks you're dealing with, here are mitigations against those risks, if you would like them, like options, and this is what they would recommend. The program then takes that data along with the partner data and tries to figure out what approach we need to go take when we come up against a roadblock or some type of issue we got to work through in terms of risk. So I want to clarify that that is the role of the tech authorities, is to help the program with technical assessments and technical risk understanding. The interface with the commercial partners is also one that is supposed to be a partnership. And what we want is we want to be able to address when is there really oversight. Oversight is direction from the NASA partner. And we want to try to minimize that so that we have innovation, so we can have speed with development and those kind of things. And really the interfaces that we will be doing direction at are going to be through milestones. That is the entrance criteria to get into milestones and the exit criteria to exit milestones. And then also when we get ready for our certification of our system. Those are really the only places where we intend to have direct direction and oversight from our side of the partnership to the commercial providers and commercial partners. Again, it is a partnership, and so it doesn't mean we're not constantly communicating. What it means is we want to hold back on constantly giving direction, which is something that we want to back away from. Let's see, the next part we wanted to address was what are the concerns with our process for documentation, our requirements, and our standards. And this becomes like the meat of what it takes in order to go put together a system. So next chart. You see this pictorial chart here is kind of an illustration that shows that everything on the left is the items that basically are inputs to our library. Everything on the left is in the library format that says these are all the inputs we need to deal with. And then what we're trying to do is package them in a planning office setting. We're trying to package those into these 4 quadrants that says where do a specific item that might be in that library fall into. And we broken that down into 4 basic categories of areas of themes that we need to put things in. The first is our roles and interfaces. That is the roles between us, the NASA partner, and the partner itself, the commercial partner. We want to understand what those roles are. We want to define what those roles are instead of exploring what those roles are in the future. And then once you get into it, then we got to change it. We want to try to understand what those roles are today, communicate that with y'all, and over time, lock that in. And so that's what's part of that red box there. It also is all the processes needed for certification. How are we planning to certify this vehicle? How are we planning to have the commercial provider provide the data so that we can partner that certification and it moves forward? All that part, the process part, is in the red. Over in the, I guess the yellow box is our crew transportation requirements. This, again, you can relate that to the idea of human rating requirements or human rating. All those things that are required in order to get that human rating for us to fly NASA crew on that particular system are going to be related to that yellow box. And then we have standards. NASA has over 50 years of experience. We don't want to lose any of that experience. And so over time, NASA and our tech authorities have put a number of those experiences into standards. Well, we want to be able to use those standards. At the same point, we don't want to dictate those standards. And so we're going to have processes by which we will talk about here's the standards we have used and we have developed over our history, over our experience. And then we're going to have a process that Scott will go through that'll talk about how we're going to, that Brent will talk through, that'll talk about how we're going to work through some of those standards. Those are the overall themes of what we're trying to get across in the way we want to deal with everything that's in the library. Next chart. I think I've covered most of the words that are a part of this pictorial chart. The only thing I would say is, back in the RFI, we had type 1 requirements. You're not going to see type 1s anymore because type 1s are, as it said in RFI 1, are really mandatory requirements. Type 1s are going to be folded into what you can look at as being crew transportation requirements. And the processes that might be in a type 1 are really going to be in our processes that are in the red box. And that's how we're packaging our thought process to look forward to how do we really want to document our suite of things we need to do and partner with the community. And so from a top level, that's our programmatic approach. Hopefully, by this explanation and through your questions you might ask later and over continuing dialogue, we will take what we got back from the RFI. This is our approach at this moment. If there's more feedback you would like to give us, we certainly would like to take that on the overall programmatic approach. So like Phil said, he was at the 50,000-foot level. I brought you down to the 20,000-foot level. Now at the 10,000-foot level, we're going to have some folks go through more of the details. So I'd like to introduce Scott, who's going to go through the insight and oversight.
So thank you and good morning. Go ahead and go to the first chart. Really, this is talking about those interfaces. A strong theme we heard out of the RFI where folks were wondering, what is this communication path, this oversight path, this direction going to work with the program? So if we'd go to the first chart. Really, as a result of that, first thing the planning team did was release the Frank Bauer, Wayne Hale Insight Oversight recommendations for the commercial crew transportation service. So hopefully most folks have got to read that. These are excerpts right out of that paper talking about what insight and oversight is defined as. Insight in this particular case was defined as the capacity to discern the true nature and of the project's efforts to design, develop, test, and operate the commercial transportation, the crew transportation system. In a little more detail, we talked about, it's modeled as a cooperative partnership. The idea here is for the insight teams to not be a burden on our partners in order to be this efficient, hopefully even more efficient, cohesive team with our partners in order to get what we need for NASA without affecting the partners' day-to-day operations. Oversight is what we think of. It's that watchful and responsible management of the development, design, operation of this system as it comes to fruition. The primary element of oversight is approval and/or direction. Through that, though, the difference here, as Ed pointed out, is going to be through very discrete events. Rather than like what we all feel today, and that's what the next three bullets are talking about, is traditionally in a lot of our human spaceflight systems and the development of those, NASA has obviously been the owner of that and been involved all the way down to the floor in those decisions. The idea here is more like what we've experienced with the COTS, as folks might know as the CATS team, the team that's working with those folks to work with those different partners there, is to work with these guys on a day-to-day basis, provide that information back to the oversight efforts, but not be in that role of providing day-to-day direction. And some parts of that I'd point out is, for example, we're not going to sign your procedures and nonconformances. Today, NASA's a part of every part of that. The idea here is, again, as pointed out, this is your design. This is how you're going to implement it, develop it. We're going to be there to learn with you, hopefully help if needed, but we'll be there every step of the way. And again, it's a familiar term is engineering review boards. We'll participate as far as informational, but we are not the decision authority at that level on those engineering review boards as issues and elements are addressed. The bottom box there is to identify is we do know there's different levels of folks that are probably going to participate in this endeavor. Some will want more help from NASA, believe it or not. Some will, some won't. So we'll have to work that out. And as we figure out the risks and trades in that, these teams will tailor in order to move in and out of that as required. Next chart. So what does that look like? This is a slight modification out of the Hale-Bauer white paper. This is a pictorial to show the suite or the different models that NASA has across its agency today. It's pretty select, but going all the way from our Science Mission Directorate type of development of spacecraft all the way over to, as we know, the Space Shuttle Constellation and the ISS programs, and how we've done insight and oversight in that range. So it's in a pictorial trying to show where do we think commercial crew might fit into this model. The idea is obviously all the way over on the left. We've got a lower level of insight and oversight involvement, and that ranges from operational programs to development programs, as pointed out with COTS and the cargo resupply. The Launch Services Program, as we know, is a very active operational program who does a lot of insight and not quite as much oversight in the models that they use, and then our traditional systems. So obviously commercial crew being a development type of effort is how does that fit in as we all move forward. And it's really to show, not to show that we're providing any less insight. Obviously the scale is a little bit subjective, and that it's going to be hopefully more efficient, more targeted in this partnership role. It's not going to be us just extracting data from a partner, but participating with and understanding what that means and communicate that back to the program so that can be used obviously in a smart way versus some objective spreadsheet or set of metrics that may or may not be effective. Next chart, please. So, to get a little more detail about what that insight team and their roles will be, what we're getting into is, what is that? How is that going to work? Basically, we see it as a collaboration effort. We're there to work with the commercial partner and getting to the goal of a certification, but obviously getting NASA what it needs in understanding so we can provide that certification. Point there is the insight team is not chartered with providing any direction. So that's going to be coming through one place that you see later that's coming out of the program directly. There's not going to be a direct interface out of these teams on a day-to-day basis providing some level of direction as we have today. I mean, we've heard through the RFI what that means. The insight manager, this lead for that particular work, is going to be that primary day-to-day point of contact with the provider. They'll be the ones in and around. They'll be participating in the meetings, working with the partner and their team, obviously. The insight teams will be part of that evaluation. They'll be pulling this information in, hoping to disseminate it. We'll talk at the bottom about what this team is composed of. But they'll be working with the program, these oversight folks, in order to understand what is going on, and we'll talk about oversight and what that means in its role in the next chart. But helping communicate that information back to the program, and it ranges. Obviously for certification is a primary thing, but it's also in resolving issues, or even in our part of looking through those to see a potential issue. This goes back to that the heritage that NASA has is we've been there and done quite a bit, and obviously we have something to offer back in the sense of helping to identify when we see an issue that might be rising to that certification. And like we talk about accelerating milestones. Again, that's to help. If there's something we can do to provide information to help the partner get over a hurdle, we're all for that. A main factor here that you'll see in the next in a pictorial is this embedded team concept. Folks with the Launch Services Program are familiar with this. We have NASA folks at those plants participating on a day-to-day basis, but this is that efficient, that partnership, that to be part of the team to bring that information back to the program without burdening the program. I mean, we don't want 100 people calling the partner every day asking for, and possibly multiple requests for the same information. That's not the case. It's hopefully going to be a direct stream coming in and out as far as that information goes. A major part of that is our team will work to have access to those systems to be able to extract this data. Obviously, there's a big sensitivity to proprietary data and sensitivity, and we'll have to work through that all together. But the idea is we'll be able to get that data as needed without having to burden in deliverables from a partner and everything that's entailed with that. The embedded team is also working to understand the requirements, compliance, insight, and oversight teams. This is that part of feeding that information back to the oversight offices to help both ways, help the partner understand those requirements, those tech standards, everything involved with that, but also those verifications and those kind of things coming back to the program so that when we come into these milestones, it's not a first-time look type of deal. You know, the goal there would be that this oversight, the program, is actually ready to go coming into the entrance of these different milestones so that they're hopefully efficient and fast. Again, this is tracking major, any kind of problems. If we see a problem, the program is identifying a problem, some kind of risk, some type of issue. Obviously, the insight team is going to be that interface with the commercial partner to try to work through that. The other loop, obviously, is if there is a recommendation coming out of the program that is a change, that's going to come through this oversight rule, this single entity, back out from program level to program level. A little bit on what that team will look like. For lack of a better word, it is kind of an integrated product team. It's a manager. There's representation from the crew office, engineering, S&MA. Also, you know, we fully expect, you know, as we go through this, the FAA, the space station program, as we come in and out of these different issues and these milestones, obviously these other folks will come in to help and assist as needed, as the draw is needed to get through these different items. We'll move in and out, but it won't be that constant force of you know, that wave that typically people feel. Next chart. So now the oversight role. Their primary purpose is this management, approval, and direction leading to this certification. As Ed pointed out earlier by Ed, the goal is this certification, is to get to that point where we can certify a spacecraft and a system as a human-rated, as he put it, slang. But that's going to be done through these discrete milestones, through the design, development, test, and verification of these systems. It is not that day-to-day piece we have that we was pulling on earlier. It is not going to be people on the floor signing documents, approving different things. It's going to be at these particular entrance and exit, you know, milestones, and when we both run into an issue that we know will affect certification. Point out again that knowledge is going to be coming through those insight teams, so that, you know, we won't be having this alternate path of communication between the partner and the program. A big part of what these oversight teams are going to be doing, is pointed out, was working with our technical authorities on the identifications of these standards, and I say the identification of standards that we'll obviously be working together to find those answers for, in partnering those in a sense of, if in what was formerly known as a Type 2, and the submittal of a standard, and how we go through and approve that tailoring, that partner process or whatever that is, that satisfies that equivalent standard. A big part of that is what Brent Jett will get into, is this fault tolerance, or this integrated safety and design analysis process. Obviously, across multiple partners, we're going to have to standardize that as much as possible to some level, so that we don't have multiple versions of trying to come up with that answer. As Ed puts it, you know, we want to be able to provide how we're going to grade the test, for lack of a better way of putting it. That way, everybody knows what they're coming up against and can be able to work to that. And then, as pointed out, working with the technical authorities on those certification requirements and standards. And then, as pointed out earlier with the insight teams, is in coming into those discrete milestones in and out, and obviously we'll move folks in and out to be able to obviously support reviews and those kind of things. Next chart. So here's a pictorial to try to show you what that insight looks like. As you can see, there's only one arrow coming from a partner to the program, and that's through those insight, that twofold insight team. That embedded team that's with the partner, but also that team of folks, engineers, safety and mission assurance folks, crew, and folks to be able to work to the best benefit, to understand those requirements. Obviously, we're going to draw on other parts of NASA. This will be a team effort. And then provide those recommendations back up to the oversight part of the program, but also when we have those interpretations that are required by the partner on different things, that we can go work with the oversight teams and bring those back to the partner. Now, obviously, that's going to be a tricky piece in the sense of, those kinds of interpretations, in over better words, is, to keep that decision velocity going. How do we do that? How do we do that in order to let the commercial partner proceed at the pace that they need to? The concept of the embedded team is talked here. That's to provide that long-term presence, developing those interpersonal relationships and trust between the NASA side, the NASA program, and these partners. This is, in better words, I guess, the badgeless effort. We're here to provide whatever we can, but also, extract what we need in order to do that certification. Next chart. So now oversight. Again, to show there's a single arrow. So when that time comes that we're coming into these milestones, or there is some kind of issue related to certification coming up or something, that rather than that typical day-to-day work, that oversight that happens at some of the lowest levels, is those insight teams working with the partners will be working with the oversight team to provide that recommendation back through the program to the partner. Not at a lower level, not this multifaceted piece coming back and forth, but working on having just the one interface back and forth, so that once we've worked up our story together, there's only one place that's coming back and forth out of the program, be that directly out of the program office manager or a delegate, but to be a single, is it a board, how that's structured, that's some of the work we're still working, trying to figure out, but to make that a single place. And then talking about there is, those design, if there's a design recommendation that's needed to facilitate a certification, and eventually that evaluation that's happening. So to get into a little more depth of how that certification, but really to talk about those tech standards and fault tolerance and that integrated safety and design analysis, is Brent Jett.
Thanks, Scott. Good morning. My name is Brent Jett, and as you heard earlier, I'm Ed's deputy for the commercial crew planning effort. In the interest of full disclosure, I'm also, I have a second job with NASA currently as well. I'm still the director of flight crew operations. And so as such, I sometimes have to timeshare meetings, and I think the meeting where topics were assigned for this forum, I don't think I was at that meeting. So I'm not sure if it's because I'm the deputy or because I missed the meeting, but I was assigned the very non-controversial topics of technical standards, failure tolerance, and certification and COFR. So hopefully I'll be able to get through these without saying something that gets me fired. Let's see. Next slide, please. We'll start with, I think, which is probably the easiest of the three topics, and that is technical standards. If you think back to the CHIRP and the RFI, the CHIRP had standards in three types. There was type 1, which were mandatory. You must use this standard in the development of your system. There were type 2 standards, and we said, well, you must use this standard, or you can use your own standard as long as it meets or exceeds the NASA standard that is, or the standard that is in this list. And then we had type 3 standards, which really were for reference only, and so they were for the commercial partner, just to reference how we have used some standards in the past. Most of the comments we got back were on the type 2 standards. There was a lot of confusion, or there was a great variety of interpretation of what does meet or exceed actually mean to the commercial partner. So we heard that, and we put a team together to try, and what that team is doing is they are writing down a document to provide more clarity into how we will we'll go through a process that allows our partner to use their standards to substitute for the type 2s. And there were two key areas that we wanted to focus on. One was what is important to NASA in those standards? And second, what processes and products result from those standards that we think are important and must have in a substitute standard from our commercial partner. So by writing all this down, we hope to give you enough clarification and direction so you can go off and propose back to us substitute standards that will make it more efficient for you to develop, design and develop this vehicle. Next chart, please. So what we intend to do is early in the partnership, we intend to have one of the earliest milestones set up where our industry partner will come back and propose those standards that they would like to use for the type 2s, to substitute for the type 2s that were in the list in the CHIRP. The type 1 standards you won't see as type 1s anymore. They're going to be, as Ed mentioned, they're going to be part of the requirements documents. So the type 2s will be the ones you see in our standards. And then, even though we think this document will be very clear in what we expect, we know there's going to be a lot of discussion back and forth on, what do you mean exactly? And so we'll be available to discuss with our partners, whether their standard that they are proposing is sufficient or not, or needs to be augmented in some way. We also feel like, there will be some cases that are pretty clear cut. We'll be able to just, look at the standard that our partner has and say, yeah, that's a good standard. It meets the intent of what we need, and we'll be able to accept it. For the cases where it may be a little more in the gray area, we intend to be able to go use outside subject matter experts to come in and help us understand whether or not that standard is acceptable or not. It's important that we do this early in the partnership, and so, as I mentioned earlier, this will be one of the earliest milestones that we intend to have. Because once we agree on that substitute standard from our partner, that standard will be baseline and then essentially is part of the requirement set and will be used for the certification process. We will maintain joint control over these standards, and we hope that this alleviates some of the issues that have come up in the past when a program starts out with a set of standards. That standard gets updated through the technical authority or by the agency, and then the program is forced to deal with some type of change in that standard. In this system, because we will be using both standards from our commercial partner as well as NASA standards, that situation could also happen in reverse. A company could have a standard that is updated partway through the development process, and we'll have to deal with whether or not we accept those changes jointly or whether we maintain the original standard we started with. Next chart, please. Okay, second topic, a little bit perhaps more, not controversial, but certainly there was a lot of discussion, and there always has been, on failure tolerance and this integrated safety and design analysis that you've heard discussed previously. Back in the CHIRP, as you remember, we had two versions of a failure tolerance requirement that we presented. The baseline version was essentially straight from 8705, which was essentially a requirement that said, that you must have failure tolerance, and the level of failure tolerance would be derived from an integrated safety and design analysis, which would tell you whether you need single failure tolerant, dual failure tolerant, et cetera. The alternative wording that was presented was a little more prescriptive as a 2 failure tolerant solution for the system. So we heard the response from industry, and then the program said, well, that's good. We know how industry feels about this. But we need to get together as an agency and as a technical community and discuss not only industry's response, but also let's revisit the work that was done in 8705 and make sure, where does the NASA technical community stand today? So there was a two-day meeting, technical meeting that was held at Kennedy Space Center. The ED's chief engineer for the planning effort, Steve Sullivan, put it together, but he involved, the NESC was involved. We had the Health and Medical Technical Authority, the Safety Technical Authorities were all involved as well. And coming out of that, the recommendation back to the program was to stay very closely aligned with what is currently in 8705. That is, not to be prescriptive in the level of failure tolerance that is required, and that is to put the onus on the designer to determine what the right amount of failure tolerance is for the vehicle. Now, I should mention that the ISS interface requirements do have additional words on failure tolerance, as you probably are aware. When you are, they do have a very prescriptive 2 failure tolerant requirement, although there is some exceptions available there for in designing for minimum risk. But you're going to have to deal with those requirements in terms of when you're in the proximity of the ISS or dock to ISS. But then during the free flight period, we will be relying on the integrated safety and design analysis for the level of failure tolerance. So, what is this? And what is this integrated analysis, and how do we use it? I would say our experience to date in Constellation was a little bit mixed in that effort. In fairness, Orion was pretty far down the road when the NPR Rev B was released, so they didn't really get a chance to start from ground zero with this requirement. The Ares, I think the Ares 1 folks did a really nice job with it. They were in a little bit better position to do that type of analysis. But what we intend to do is, as Scott mentioned, is set our expectations for what we expect to see out of that analysis that leads to the decision on failure tolerance, whether that is trade studies of alternative systems and alternative redundancy implementations, probability risk assessments done to a certain standard. We will set those expectations of what data we want to see to provide that level playing field across the providers. And then hopefully jointly, when we both look at the data, we come to the same conclusion about, what is the proper level of failure tolerance. We also want to emphasize that there's not, we actually, at least in the current wording, we've removed the phrase that says minimum of 1, because the minimum is what the analysis says the minimum is. It's not, it's not a minimum of 1. But we realize that there may be some instances where failure tolerance is just not practical in a system, and in those cases there will be provisions to come back to the program and get approval, and the program will be responsible for getting the technical authorities to buy in to that, and we'll have a mechanism to deal with those situations. Next slide, please. Now, my last 3 slides deal with system certification and the COFR process. Now, I would say that 3 slides at this point may be a little overkill, since we, NASA, the NASA community, we're really still just starting to talk about how we're going to handle system certification and COFR. But we did get a lot of questions back in the RFI, so we want to tell you what our thinking is today. I would caveat that the words you see on the slides are very commercial crew program-centric words, and so I'll try to blend in a little bit of the ISS and maybe the bigger picture in terms of certification as I talk through these slides. I think everyone is aware of what we mean by system certification and the COFR. System certification, both of these processes are really there to just ensure that the commercial, our partner, can demonstrate that their system meets our requirements. Now, from the program, the commercial crew program perspective, we're mostly interested in the human rating piece of that system safety. So our intent is to certify the system from a human rating perspective that you can carry NASA crews. Now, the ISS program has a little bit different perspective on certification. They're going to certify that you meet all their interface requirements and that you can safely operate in the proximity of space station and dock and stay docked to it for the mission. So there really will be two programs involved in this certification effort. One of the other key questions we got back in the RFI is, well, and this was primarily launch vehicle centric, but it was also some spacecraft centric piece of it was can we be grandfathered in based on flight history? And I think the best way to answer that is I don't think anyone in the program likes that term grandfathered, but it is fair to say you can use flight history and flight data to get through the certification process, and we will take that data and be willing to use that and give you credit for the data that you can present based on your flight history. But just the fact that you've flown or been flying does not mean you're going to be grandfathered out of a certification process. Next slide, please. Okay, this one has a little bit of a graphic that talks about some of the elements of the CTS certification. Again, remember, this is more program centric than both program and ISS. I think the key part on this slide is that we intend for this process, this certification, this initial certification of your system, to really be led by the partner. We want you to demonstrate that your system meets, your end-to-end system meets both the design and the performance requirements, has the prescribed level of safety and margins in your system. We're going to expect the partner to write the certification plan, and of course NASA will have to approve it, but we expect that to come from you. And then our insight teams, as they go along, will ensure that you're proceeding, make sure that we're not seeing any hiccups on the way to certification. And then at our milestone reviews and oversight, we will eventually have what is essentially the equivalent of a DCR or a certification milestone where you get your certification. Next chart, please. The COFR process, you get an initial certification, but then for every mission, just like today, there's going to be a process where we verify that the mission-specific hardware falls within the certification, and any modifications have been certified. And then we also focus a little more heavily in the COFR process on are the products there to go execute this particular mission in terms of, you think about your ops team, your ground, your launch team, your recovery teams. Are all the products, training, and the team itself, are they ready to go forward and execute the mission? Again, from a program perspective, we expect this to be led by our partner when we do the certification at our level. And we'll do it in a similar way to the initial certification, but it'll be like a typical flight readiness review for a shuttle program does today. But I would mention that if you're assuming that we're going to be going to space station, and that's why those are the missions that we're talking about, there will be another level that we'll have to go through together. Both the program and the partner, we will be required to go to an agency, a NASA agency level flight readiness review, in which the agency will hold a readiness, as they do today for Soyuz, as they do today for shuttle, for HTV, for ATV. There will be a NASA agency COFR process, but at that point, our initial thinking is really the onus is on us, the NASA program, to go to that level. We'll need your support, but we'll be presenting to the agency why we are ready to go execute that mission. So if my BlackBerry doesn't have 15 messages on it telling me that I said the wrong thing, that'll be a success. We do have some key topics left, and one that that Maria is going to cover. The first one she's going to cover is liability and indemnification, and then she's going to talk some about facility usage as well. So, Maria?
Thanks, Brent. Good morning. My name is Maria Colora, and I am going to cover the last few topics that we have planned to discuss today. So the good news is you all will be able to interact with us very shortly. Next chart, please. The first topic is liability. It is a big concern both for the government and for industry. It is a major consideration that we have to account for all aspects of the mission, not only launch and entry, but also for proximity operations, obviously for the ISS missions, as well as crew and spaceflight participant safety. We recognize, and you all have told us very clearly, that there are several potential mitigations that we can look into, the first of which is commercial insurance. We understand that there may be some issues with obtaining it and the cost for it, so we are certainly understanding that and looking into it. There's a potential for waivers or contractual measures, and also congressional and or federal legislative actions, which obviously will need government action to make happen. We want to assure you that although we don't have a specific solution to offer you today, we did hear you and we are also concerned, and that we are actively working with the FAA to try and address these things. Specifically, the authority and the roles and responsibilities of both NASA and the FAA with regard to all aspects of the mission. Gaps in the current FAA regulations. As you are aware, the licensing process only covers launch and entry. In addition, we are considering indemnification options that think about the benefits and the effects on the commercial industry. Next chart, please. The next topic I'm going to talk about is facility usage. First, I'd like to provide you with a little bit of background information. As you all know, the shuttle will be retiring sometime next year. But something you may not be aware of is that the Space Shuttle program actually funds a majority of the spaceflight infrastructure across the agency. Because of this, NASA had been working to figure out how we were going to transition those costs, and based on our needs analysis, it appeared that the Constellation program would be able to pick up a majority of that funding after the shuttle retired. However, with the 2011 presidential budget proposal, we had to put a new effort underway to readdress our usage situation. So next chart. So what I wanted to let you know is that there is some uncertainty regarding the availability of NASA facilities. To that end, centers are providing recommendations for facility, what we're calling state of readiness. And what that means is we're actually doing a needs analysis, and we're considering the timing in which those facilities would be needed. And the idea there is if it's a need that's an immediate one that has consistency, we would recommend that those facilities stay open and we pay to maintain them. If, in fact, the needs show that a facility is needed, but it's not for a couple of years, we would then potentially suggest that we would put that in a mothball state where it basically is going to take some funding to bring it back up into a usable facility. There's various categories, and all of those kinds of efforts are underway, like I said, across all the centers. In addition to that, there was a recent NASA policy decision that was made requiring users to pay for facilities as they are needed. So it's not unlike you heard me say in the background, the shuttle program had a lot of facility needs, and the program was responsible for paying for those. So there's two key points I'd like to make regarding that. The first is pricing will be based on demand. And what do I mean by that? If there's multiple users for a facility, costs can be shared. If there's a single user, unfortunately, it means that user will have to burden the full cost. So the other aspect is that state of readiness I talked about. If the facility is up and running, obviously, the cost would not be increased to bring it to a readiness state because it would already be there. So the other thing that Space Launch Complex initiative that is ongoing, and it may be an avenue for having funding available to help in the situation, at least at the Florida Launch Complex. So what does this mean for a commercial crew? First, the commercial crew program, at the time it becomes a program, will not directly fund facilities. In addition, we will not be in a position of negotiating on behalf of any particular commercial partner to any NASA center. So having said that, the true message is we're encouraging you all to go talk to the NASA centers. Please provide them inputs. Let them know of your needs. Let them know of the timing of your needs, and start negotiating pricing. This way, as they're putting together their plans and states of readiness, they can at least have a good understanding of the potential needs and plan accordingly, and hopefully reduce the costs overall. Okay, next chart, please. Okay, so this is the last topic I'm going to cover. As you can see, it's a very generic depiction of the basic elements that we consider to be a part of the concept of operations, and in this case, it specifically is for an ISS mission. The primary message I want to communicate here is that the commercial partner will be responsible to provide end-to-end integration, management, and integration of this concept of operations entirely. And as you can see, it includes ground operations, launch operations, mission planning, crew training and mission ops, vehicle and crew recovery, vehicle safing, as well as any disposable activities that are required. Disposal activities. Again, it was just an attempt to let you know that the commercial partner is going to be responsible for everything, and we expect a fully integrated solution in support of commercial crew. So with that, that ends my topics. For discussion, Ed's going to talk to you a little bit about our roadmap ahead, and then we'll start our question and answer session. Thank you.
At this point, we want to talk a little bit about the roadmap ahead. I wanted to, and at that point, we'll go to the next section of what we're trying to get across today with y'all and continuing communications. First, I want to conclude that over the last hour and a half or so of time, hopefully we demonstrated to y'all that we think human spaceflight is hard, and we hope that we are getting across to you all that putting humans into space is not a simple endeavor, it's a rather difficult endeavor. And if you think about it, the facts speak for themselves. The United States on the shuttle program has flown about 130 times, in which we've launched vehicles into low Earth orbit and brought them back home. Overall, the planet, all the nations of the planet, not only put a few hundred missions into space and recovered them back again. And it's just a few hundred. And you think about that in relation to that very first picture and some of the things that Phil said. If you go to a rather large airport, they fly over 150 flights a day. And here, our entire experience in human spaceflight for the planet has been a few hundred over the course of our entire history. So you can see that going from an aircraft or an airplane kind of environment to a space environment and flying humans in that regard is a very difficult endeavor. It is not easy, and we want everyone to understand that it is hard and we have to do it right. But I also want to tell everyone that from the experiences of NASA over the last 50 years and from the experiences of the entire planet over the last 50 years, I think we can figure out a way to make another system very successful, a commercial crew system, in partnership with the industry of this country and with NASA in order to go make that happen. So I'm very optimistic we can continue on with this endeavor and continue to have low Earth orbit capability for our crews as well as people from the planet to get to low Earth orbit. Let's see, on the roadmap ahead, what I wanted to get across is that this is the first of many opportunities I hope we have to discuss. So if you can go to that first chart or the next chart. Our roadmap ahead is to continue in order to communicate with you all through questions and answers, through forums. Our idea is to communicate almost monthly if we can. Our attempt is to communicate monthly. It may not always be in this type of format. In fact, we'd like to get feedback eventually from you all if this format is worthwhile or not. But the idea is let's communicate at least once a month in some type of forum and some type of method in order to continue this dialogue and our discussions. We are doing that, and in fact, the planning team today is working hard each and every day here to put together what we think we need to go do in order to build our future. We're not doing this from a vacuum. The folks that Alan represents and the folks that Alan is leading are very much a key part of what we're trying to do. He has the experience of doing something in a unique way. He has the experience of going through some of the pains and tough parts of that. And he also has the experience of what it takes to go do things differently. So at this point, I'd like to ask Alan if he had some comments about how we go from today's environment of human spaceflight to tomorrow's.
Sure. Well, Ed, we've learned so much over the last 4 years since we awarded our first COTS agreements on how to move from being a traditional government contractor relationship to becoming a real partner with industry and a consumer of commercial services. Instead of providing detailed specifications and requirements, which NASA verifies and approves and is involved in every day-to-day step of the way, we now identify what we need. What do we need in the form of a service to meet our needs? So I think that's a big difference in what we're talking about in terms of a traditional relationship and then becoming a partner and a consumer of services. We're identifying the needs and let the creativity and the innovation of industry and ingenuity give them maximum flexibility to allow that to happen. Hopefully, that will result in lower cost systems so that this will meet the needs not only for NASA and the government, but also will enable the opening of new markets and have these services available for other customers. That is our goal. And yet we still have to maintain our standards of safety and reliability so that we can be assured that these will be useful and meet our needs. So we've learned to strike that balance between our end of the partnership, where we provide our vast knowledge and experience of human spaceflight and our resources and our facilities and our equipment in some cases, where we facilitate the availability of those resources that we have. So that's our end of the partnership. So we've learned a lot. We're looking forward to completing this initial cargo partnership with next year, and we have always expected to move on to this stage where we evolve to commercial crew, and we are really excited about continuing our work with you and moving into this new program.
Alan brought up a good point that the key factor that's different in commercial crew is this human spaceflight certification, and it is important that these systems be safe. That is one of our primary objectives, and there's been a lot of dialogue about whether the private sector is capable of developing safe human spaceflight systems, and our answer to that is fairly simple, which is that these systems will not fly until NASA is convinced with confidence that they are safe. We are going to award essentially the human spaceflight certification. That is, the onus is still on NASA to provide that certification. So to say whether the private sector is up to this job or not really misses the point, again, that this is still a partnership. The provider is bringing their solutions, and again, NASA holds the spaceflight certification award, so to speak. So the onus is still on the government, as well as the private sector, to ensuring these systems are safe. So I wanted to just make that point clear.
Very good. Thank you, Phil. And we'll be very happy to be working with Alan's folks and all the center between JSC and KSC and all the other NASA centers in order to go make this happen. And see, what the planning office is doing each and every day is our primary focus today is really in two areas. The biggest being what is our definition of our requirements? You saw us talk about that. Brent talked about that a little bit. What are our processes by which we want to try to be as streamlined as possible, and how do we want to incorporate that streamlined approach in with our partners, and then share that with y'all? And then what are the interfaces? Not only interfaces between commercial partners and NASA as a partnership, but also with the other program, the other big program, ISS. For us, ISS becomes a major partner in how we go forward. The second part of what we're trying to do is really understand how we're going to be investors in this idea, how we're going to work through an acquisition in this idea, and all those are at the very early stages of what we're trying to work through. But my team and the team that supports us throughout the agency is very much engaged in both of those efforts on a day-to-day basis. Again, I want to emphasize we are looking in the end to have an end-to-end solution. NASA does not want to be the integrator of a number of systems to bring them together and then integrate one complete system. We would like very much for the partner to bring an integrated system to the table, which includes the flight hardware as well as the processes needed to ground process that hardware, fly that hardware, and recover that hardware, and throughout all that, making sure that the mission is safe and the mission can be completed. Of course, all of this is contingent on complete direction that we will get from the executive branch and the legislation in Congress as we move forward. And we'll be watching closely what those are and trying to dialogue with them as well so we can together go create this capability. So again, our activities are contingent on direction we get from the other parts of the government. See, that's what we had for our prepared presentation. I'm going to turn it back over for our next series of events.
All right, thank you, Ed. All right, now we're ready for the question and answer period. So here at headquarters, those that you have questions, please walk down to the microphone. And while you're thinking about that, we do have some questions online that I'll give to the panel while people are thinking about walking down front. From Jim Johnson from DCI Services and Consulting for Ed or Brent. Does the NASA Commercial Crew Development Program envision itself as the certification authority for all manned spacecraft, both for NASA and commercial customers?
Let's see, I'll start that. Let's see, the answer would be we are there to certify for NASA missions and our NASA crewed missions. In the process of doing this for the NASA crewed missions, we envision that the partner will have a pretty robust system. And then we are also working with the FAA very closely. We've just begun that. But the goal is to continue to work with the FAA to where when missions are not NASA crewed missions, that the FAA is very much a partner or very much the agency that's going to be looking to make sure that the system is going to go fly and fly correct for those non-NASA missions. The goal there, very much from the first from the RFI, was that we need to be very close with the FAA, and we have begun to do that. In fact, just in the last couple weeks, we have participated with them in some workshops, and we are in the process of sharing capabilities from what we do for human space flight and what they do for their commercial space environment, and sharing people back and forth so we can begin to basically pollinate each other and understand how each other looks at those capabilities. So the short answer to the question is we are going to certify for NASA crewed missions. We believe that that will bring a robust system to allow other passengers.
Bert, do you have anything to add?
The only thing I would add is that I think it's important if we work through this process correctly with the FAA, at the end, when the FAA is doing the certification for a non-NASA mission, it will be very similar, and we won't be asking our industry partners to use a completely different type of certification process. We don't think that would be cost effective in the long run. So I think our goal in working with the FAA is to ensure we have a very similar process for the certification.
Okay. This person wanted to remain anonymous. Is NASA going to be open to commercial system design and operations set to serve other markets rather than just optimized for the ISS crew transportation mission?
Yeah, I can take that one. As I said in my remarks, we have two goals for this program. One is safe, reliable, cost-effective crew transportation for the ISS, as well as enabling the development of non-NASA missions to low Earth orbit. So we have both goals, and again, we're trying to achieve both of those and not one at the expense of the other. So I would say both.
Okay. The next question is from a Thomas Brusk in Germany. For Ed, who are the prime contractor companies who can deliver the full service crew transportation and when?
Well, let's see, I think we're asking the same question. We believe that there are a number of companies out in industry who can provide this capability as an end-to-end set. We do not have partners today. We do not have an acquisition plan that's on the street in which we've awarded anything at this point. We are a planning office at this point. But I would say that there are a number of companies that are U.S.-based that can do this, and we encourage all of them to come up with innovative ways in order to go achieve this capability. When? As soon as they're ready. You know, the shuttle's going to end sometime in 2011 after a very good 30 years of operation on which we learned a lot about spaceflight during that period of time. There will be a period of time that it will take to develop this system. We have various ranges. We have folks that think we can do this rather quickly. We have other folks that think that it'll take a number of years. I would say that our goal would be today is in order to have a capability by the 2015 timeframe. That would be our goal today. Of course, there's a lot of constraints and parameters that affect that goal, and so we have to work closely with our partners and closely with the branches of government in order to try to acquire the fact that we can get to a date of around 2015.
And I just have one thing to add on that, Mike. We do have a variety of concepts that have been proposed both in the public and internally to NASA through previous awards and solicitations. So we have some idea, and there is a very broad range of systems, very different types of systems, different types of hardware that have a very wide range of cost estimates. And everybody wants to know exactly how much it's going to cost and exactly how long it's going to take. And that kind of information cannot be known at this stage of the program. It has to do with a lot of decisions that have not been made yet. A lot of it is going to depend on the final approach that we come out with in terms of how we're going to do human spaceflight certification, how we're going to do this program. And as you have seen, we have a lot of details today, but there are many details going forward that are going to impact the cost and schedule associated with these systems that have not been made yet. So it is impossible to answer those types of questions with a very high degree of fidelity. But one thing you can say, we can say definitively, is the longer we wait to start, the longer it'll take to develop these systems. So we're very anxious to get started. We're hoping that we can get budget authority and approval from the legislative branch to proceed robustly with this program as soon as possible. Because one thing is clear, the longer we wait, the longer it'll take to have the next U.S. flag mission with humans on it, which will extend the gap, which is something that we are trying to avoid as much as possible.
Okay. Could we have NASA TV put that slate up with regards to the address with comments on it? Thank you. All right, Phil, this question from Thomas is for you. What is the opinion of the international partners, Europe, Japan, Canada, about the Commercial Crew Initiative? Should they participate in the Commercial Crew Initiative?
Well, in terms of the international partners, I would hope that they would be customers, just like NASA is, for this service. And we're going to have to work out the details of how exactly they would acquire those services. But in terms of the international partners, when you use that term in terms of the space station program, we see those as customers for these flights. In terms of international capabilities, we can say that any provider coming forward to bid on these types of capabilities that we're going to ask for have to meet all U.S. laws and regulations. That's going to be a fundamental requirement of the program. You've got to meet all U.S. laws and regulations. However, that does allow for international contributions, and we've seen some international contributions from our COTS program. We anticipate that there will be international contributions to the hardware when they come forward. But again, you will have to meet all U.S. laws and regulations associated with ownership and things of that nature. It's almost the commercial space industry, while it's not exactly the same, but you could see it as somewhat like the automotive market. You can't find a car that's 100% built in any particular company or country. We have a very global capability, and we'd like to bring those capabilities to bear as long as we still, again, meet U.S. laws and regulations. Anything to add from my esteemed panel members? Okay. You good?
Okay, the next one is for Alan. It's from Josh Cryer of newmars.com. Wouldn't it be more effective to close the manned spaceflight gap by funding Cont'd immediately?
Well, we have a number of goals and objectives in the program, one of which is competition. We think that's a very strong element of the commercial crew program. And I believe now that we've evolved and we've matured our expectations for standards and human safety, and we've consolidated now all of that knowledge that we've gained over 50 years into a set of requirements, that we should make that available to everybody and have a competition that would include multiple companies. So I don't think that would be the optimum thing to do, just to award a Cont'd.
Okay, thank you, Alan. And from a Jim Johnson for Brent. In the effort of eliminating Type 1 standards and incorporating them into the requirements document, will the new requirements be broken out as individual standalone requirements, vice just citing to comply with the aforementioned Type 1 standards?
Okay, that's a good question. So we mentioned that the Type 1 standards are going to be part of our requirements documents. Ideally, we would, as a program, be able to decompose all those standards for you into individual requirement statements. And we have done that in some cases. It's a pretty big job. The health and medical standards that are Type 1, for example, we've made a lot of progress on actually just essentially transforming those into requirement statements that are in the document themselves. We haven't done that with all the Type 1 standards yet. And whether or not we will get there before we have an announcement on the street to begin an acquisition, I don't know. We're working through some of the safety ones. If you go back and look at the safety Type 1, they were a little more specific in their listing of a Type 1 standard. In many cases, under the safety, they actually just refer to a specific paragraph or paragraphs from a standard. So we're going to do the best we can to whittle those down into very specific statements for you, since they are mandatory.
Okay, thank you. And Phil, here's a budget question for you. I'm sure you're thrilled about that. The President's budget proposal of about $6 billion over 5 years appears to support development assistance of 4 to 6 commercial partners. With Congress headed toward a budget that at best provides about $1.3 billion over 3 years, how many commercial partners do you expect that funding level to support through development?
Well, that's a good question. The reduced budget that you mentioned only was in the first few years of the program. I think the authorization bill that was signed by the Senate was for 11, 12, and 13. So that was not the full budget that we would expect to bring to bear for the development program. So it's a little bit unsure. Right now, we are planning for the execution of the President's budget. We are having some discussions on contingency plans associated with that, but we have not fully developed any kind of alternative plan for alternative budgets, of which there could be an infinite number of variations that you could assume would be coming out of the budget process. So right now we're still committed towards the planning of the President's budget, which is $5.8 billion. And as we said a couple times, if we get less, we will have to reevaluate those plans. However, we would, again, competition is a fundamental aspect of the strategy. So if we get, well, I don't want to say exactly what we would do, but we would have to trade schedule for the commercial, or for the potential for competition, and I would say competition is a very strong driver. So, so I would just say that. So as I don't get an email on my BlackBerry after I'm done.
So maybe I could elaborate
Sure,
a little
go
bit,
ahead.
the question also asked, well, how many companies do we think we can partner with? Well, that is certainly an unknown. I mean, we won't know until we get an update with proposals. But we did have 3 rounds of competition where we had some insight into the number of companies that are interested, and there is a large number of companies, from small emerging companies all the way up to the large established aerospace companies who have expressed interest in commercial crew. And we're also encouraging not only competition but a number of partners. I mean, that is an important aspect, to have multiple providers in the development phase. And we have seen in these early rounds of the COTS proposals and commercial crew development that there's a large range of cost estimates to complete, ranging from the lower to the higher end. So what we can say is we believe with the funding that is proposed that this should enable multiple companies.
The other advantage that competition is going to bring for us is, traditionally NASA has acquired a specific thing. We've been very clear we want this thing, and it has a lot of detailed specifications, and we usually get that one thing. What we would like would be to have a portfolio of capabilities and options. And if to draw an analogy, it would be very good for any household to potentially have a minivan that's available for transportation, as well as a sports car like a Maserati that only has 2 seats. Depending on what you're trying to do, it'd be great to have both of those capabilities for whatever needs that you may have. And so one system may not be the best. We would definitely like to have a portfolio of capabilities, more than one. And I think that would lead to a more robust ISS program. It would lead to more opportunities for NASA to go beyond low Earth orbit, and obviously a lot more opportunities for the private sector to provide these services, see which ones work best in the private sector and the commercial marketplace, and see which ones win out. That's very typical kind of marketplace that we see in all aspects, not just transportation.
And I'll add just a word or two. Competition is extremely important, and that is what we're trying to achieve here by trying to have multiple capabilities that we can go use. From a project management standpoint, you always look at cost, schedule, and technical. And when one gets put into concrete, or one is fixed, that means the other 2 can float. When 2 are fixed, that means you have only one that can float. And when all 3 are fixed, you end up having problems. And so we have to look at if whatever funding levels we get in order to help with the partnership, that becomes our fixed investment. The technical requirements, if you look at the technical side, the human rating requirements that we are going to be working through and eventually partnering with industry becomes a pretty firm set of requirements we need to go work towards. So then it says, well, where is the float? Well, the float, in my mind, is in schedule. That's why I was a little soft about 2015. It depends on how much money we have to provide for the investment, and also how many partners within competition there are. And the second part of that is how do we go do that investment? And so those are our knobs that we can turn from our project management investment. The knob that talks about human rating is not really a knob that we can turn up the gain or down the gain. That's going to be a fixed gain.
Okay. For Ed or Brent, is the construct and name of NASA Human Rating being replaced by Crew Transportation System Certification?
Yes. And there's some reasons for that. We, within the program, refer to it as a certification to fly NASA crew members, primarily because 8705 has already sort of captured the term human rating, and it is a very specific application of 8705 to a government-developed system. So we're trying to move away from that term as much as we can and use the term certification to fly NASA crew members.
Okay. Thank you, Brent. And just a reminder that people here in the auditorium can ask questions. We don't have to rely upon everyone online unless you're sitting there using your BlackBerry to send them in. Okay, Phil, this one's for you. Is the new Commercial Crew Development Program going to reside in a new NASA Commercial Spaceflight Mission Directorate? It seems like the Exploration System Mission Directorate has a conflict of interest with commercial human spaceflight.
I guess I don't perceive a conflict at all. The commercial crew initiative, if it's approved, will become and already is becoming an integral part of our exploration plans. We have an activity internal to the Exploration Systems Mission Directorate referred to as the HEFT, and it is a framework team that is looking at our architecture going forward out many, many years on how we're going to accomplish our deep space exploration mission. And the Earth to low Earth orbit transportation mode for one of the primary options is provided by Commercial Crew. So I don't see a conflict at all. I don't foresee the need for a separate mission directorate, certainly for commercial activities, but I would anticipate an organization at some point that is focused on this development program once approved. So we'll have to stand that up, just like NASA stands up any normal program. But I foresee that as fitting in very well with the Exploration Systems Mission Directorate. Again, that is where the COTS effort has been executed over the last 4 to 5 years. So the Mission Directorate has gotten the benefit of that experience and would hope to leverage that.
Okay, thank you. We have another series of questions coming in from online. This one is from Regina Garson from the Huntsville Space Professionals. Do you see this as a national effort? What do you see, if any, as the role of current NASA centers and contractors from across the country, such as with Shuttle, Constellation, and Ares, who are already involved in both facilitating current ISS access and furthering human space exploration beyond low Earth orbit?
Well, let's see. This is Ed. I think the short answer is we are going to get help from everybody. And from a NASA standpoint, we need, on these InSight teams, and Scott can talk a little bit more about the InSight teams. Within these InSight teams, the core or the heartblood of that InSight team is really the engineers and the safety community supporting the efforts of the commercial provider. So those engineers are going to be making up the folks that got to look at cooling systems and electrical systems, at structural systems, at launch systems, at launch abort systems, are going to be from throughout NASA in order to help create that InSight team. They're not going to be all at Kennedy Space Center. They're not going to all be at Kennedy and Johnson Space Center. They're going to be from throughout the agency in order to go help. And the type of folks that we need for this InSight role are folks who have that experience. Bringing someone new who is new to NASA and new to the industry of space and saying, okay, now you're doing InSight on a particular provider, on a particular system, doesn't make any sense. We need to bring the expertise that we have to bear to help the provider be successful. And you only do that by having folks that have that experience level. And that's what I would say from a NASA standpoint. From a contractor standpoint, again, we envision that the folks that are going to be coming up with solutions and coming up with capabilities are going to be the contractors that are in the wide portfolio of what is available today. Some of those are located obviously in Huntsville, and others are located throughout the country. But the goal is every human spaceflight endeavor that NASA has taken has had contractors and has had partnerships and very smart folks that reside within the industry help get us to those particular capabilities. It isn't always NASA and it isn't always industry. It's always a partnership. And in my mind, we're doing that same thing here. So it's the intellectual property of the country that's got to go make this thing happen, not NASA nor all by itself the industry. And see, you want to talk a little bit more about InSight?
No, you covered it.
Okay.
Okay. We have a couple of questions from Tariq Malik of Space.com. How closely will private partners work with NASA while drawing up their certification safety reports, as well as making new vehicle or plan revisions if initial drafts are unacceptable?
Well, that pulls back to how these insight and oversight teams will work together with the partner. Obviously, as those plans come together with the partner, working with the insight team, we're going to communicate that obviously with the program. The idea is not to hand reports back and forth, but to work together to make sure that when that plan comes to fruition, it's already a done deal, and hopefully a lot of these kind of reviews are really a formality, would obviously be a goal. So, these insight, as Ed was pointing on, these experts on our side, bringing them to bear to help in that, and that's not only just on the technical side, but obviously on the process side, as much as we can to facilitate that ability.
Yeah, I would add to that and say, when you think about how a certification plan is developed and prepared, you start with your requirements, and in this case, the certification requirements for NASA crew members. We intend to partner with industry in developing the verification statements for each of those requirements. That's something we will have to work together. Once we have those verification statements identified, that along with your standards, your type 2s, which have your processes and products that need to be done and conformed with for certification, that really forms the basis for your certification plan.
Okay, thank you. Will there be a limit to any private partner attempts to draw up safety certification plans before NASA steps in or passes on a partnership?
See, I guess I got to understand that question a little bit
confused
better.
by
But in terms of setting up partnerships, that is truly up to the industry to go do that. NASA's not going to drive partnerships within industry partners. That's really up to the industry to do. In terms of them coming up with, or industry coming up with certification, here's what we envision a human certification to be. We very much would like that feedback, and the way we're going to do that is as we continue on this effort of trying to define what our commercial transportation system certification is, we plan to put that out into the public realm with the industry and get feedback. And so as we work through that process over the next number of months, we definitely would like feedback, and if there is a particular industry partner out there that says this is what we think you need to do for certification, we certainly would like that feedback. I would tell you NASA comes with 50 years of history of successes and of hard failures in which we've learned what it means to be to put people on board a vehicle and to certify that vehicle ready to go fly. And so we have that experience. So when a particular partner might say, this is what we think we need to go do, to me, that's a point of departure for dialogue with NASA to say, all right, here's how we can work this together.
Okay, thank you, Ed. We have a couple questions here, so let's go back to headquarters.
My name is Trey Sutton, and I'm with Alvarez and Marcel. Question likely for Brent. So on the Type 2 requirements, for the companies that come forward with substitute requirements, will that remain proprietary or confidential between the commercial partner and NASA, or will that be shared across the other partners?
That's a very good question. One of the reasons we broke out those Type 2s as a separate document, essentially, is so that we can have a different document for each partner and maintain proprietary data and processes, so that we would not share those across. Those would be unique to each partner.
Thank you.
I'm Bart Jansen from Gannett Newspapers with a question or two for, I guess, Ms. Kalura. I wondered if there was yet a ballpark figure for how much it might cost for the facilities cost to launch a commercial crew to the space station, and also whether there's any concern, as I understood it, the fixed costs for the shuttle program were part of the reason to argue against additional flights, and I wondered if the cost of paying for facilities at Kennedy Space Center might discourage people from launching there or send them elsewhere.
First of all, unfortunately, we don't have a specific cost per facility. Like I mentioned, we are going through the process now of determining what those costs are. It's anticipated that in the October timeframe, so very soon, we'll have an idea of what it would cost per facility. But of course, it's going to vary because we'll have to understand what each partner's needs are. So those costs will, like I said, vary. If you could repeat the second part of your question.
I understood that the costs of maintaining the shuttle program month to month is part of what discourages having additional flights, because you've got to keep all those, everything running, and it's like $200 million a month, I guess. I wondered if fixed costs at the facilities are costlier than elsewhere. Perhaps it would discourage people from launching at Kennedy or sending them elsewhere. I wondered if that's a concern.
At the risk of getting an email, do you mind if I jump in here on maybe help Maria a little bit? As you look at facilities that NASA is going to maintain to support our exploration beyond low Earth orbit, I mean, where I think there's tremendous leverage and opportunity for a commercial partner is where NASA is going to maintain the facility and utilize it because we need it for exploration beyond low Earth orbit and development of those systems. In those cases, the facility is there, it's operating, it's available, and the cost is going to be less than a facility that only is needed by one of our commercial partners. In that case, if the facility is not needed by NASA for its systems that it's developing, I see that as almost being cost prohibitive for a commercial partner to be able to have enough business and enough use of that facility to fund both the fixed and variable costs. So I think the opportunity here is when NASA identifies those facilities we need for exploration, what facilities then are, can our commercial partners leverage? And 21st Century Space Complex may be one of those.
Yeah, and I would say that the facilities that NASA has, there are specific facilities at the Kennedy Space Center that can be used in order to go process hardware and fly hardware. But there's a number of other capabilities throughout other NASA centers that industry may very well want to go use. Wind tunnels for testing, art jets for entry heating work, modeling actually, and using services that NASA has for some of those things. Chambers, test chambers, and being able to do engine testing. NASA has for our benefits over the last 50 years, we have lots of capabilities that can come to bear. Like Brent said, if NASA is going to continue to do other things in space, not just commercial crew, and so if there's multiple users of a particular facility, obviously the cost for that facility for any particular user will go down, and we hope that becomes a model for a number of different facilities that NASA has to offer. I don't want folks just to think that Kennedy is what we're talking about. We're talking about all the NASA centers that have capability to offer. In terms of the 21st Century, that is a specific program that or initiative that the President has put forward that says that we have been flying vehicles out of the Space Coast for quite a long time, and some of the infrastructure there needs to be moved from what we've done in the past to what we're thinking about in the future. It'd be very helpful from a standpoint of 21st Century in order to look at the capabilities that can launch multiple systems from the Space Coast in an efficient manner. And it goes back to what Brent said. If we can figure out ways to do that efficiently in which you have multiple users using some of the same basic core capabilities, we think that there's an economy of scale there that can be approached for all the partners.
Okay, I have another question here that came in online. NASA's Commercial Crew and Cargo program at JSC that has led to successful COTS and commercial crew development initiatives. With these successful programs establishing the basis and confidence and prospect of commercial human spaceflight, are they going to be part of a new NASA commercial crew development program led now by KSC?
I'll have Alan say a few words, but the simple answer is yes. We want them. We need them. They have the experience, and without them, I think we would be slowed up in our process.
Our program should be coming to completion next year, and we had expected all along to move on to the full commercial crew program. So, of course, we are excited about moving forward and supporting the new program.
Okay, and we have a question here at headquarters.
Yeah, Kevin Miller with Ball Aerospace. You've mentioned that the Insight Oversight teams will be structured and flexible, both in terms of supporting what NASA's objectives there are, as well as addressing what the partner requirements and desirements are in terms of support. My question is, will that be a costed element of a partner offer?
Well, we haven't gotten that far with it, as far as how would you parse out somebody's time. I mean, it becomes tough to delineate whether they're in this role, if they're actually supporting the certification on behalf of NASA, or if they're providing a service to the partner. There will be some clear-cut roles, obviously, where a partner is needing a lab service or an analysis or something that is not characteristically in itself part of this certification process. But at this point, the reality is we just want to figure out what is that balance in order to assist the partner. So in that ancillary role, we're getting the data we need to do that certification. So, I see that Phil wants to jump in and help me out. But the reality is, what is that line? When does somebody's job stop being part of their inherent NASA job and providing a service back to this partner? We'll have to figure that out.
Was the question more on, would that be something that NASA would cover in terms of cost? Right. Is that something we would pay for? Is that what the question was?
The question really is in terms of leveling the playing field. How do you do an apples to apples comparison of offers?
I thought there was something more to that. I'll let you guys. It's a good point.
Let's see. We definitely want a level playing field, and at the same point, we know that there are certain in this portfolio, there are certain folks that don't have as much spaceflight experience as others. And so NASA will bring to bear the fact that we can do that. We can make that our intelligence or our IP capabilities are equal across the board. What we will make sure we don't do is that a provider who now starts using a whole lot of NASA capability and thinks they're getting it for no cost, we will have to work through that, and it doesn't come at no cost. If we're really helping to develop something for the provider, and the provider's not doing it on his own, and NASA is providing that service, then that definitely becomes something that will become costed to that partner. Doesn't mean we're not in favor of that. That very well could be helpful, but it doesn't come at no cost. What the Insight team is doing is trying to say we can bring our IP capability across all partners equally, and say, if you have questions, if we have, hey, this is what we mean about our requirements, and if you want to talk about, well, does this solution set meet those set of requirements, and how can we talk through that? The discussion is exactly what NASA needs to participate in, and that is really at no cost. But if all of a sudden the partner is looking for NASA to do the hardcore analysis in order to go do testing for that particular partner, that will have a cost.
Okay. Now, last question from over here.
Thanks, Mike. Yes, my name is Cynthia Martin Brennan. I'm with Orbitech out of Madison, Wisconsin. And I want to jump ahead a few years. When NASA becomes a consumer, and again, this is for anybody on the panel, when NASA becomes a consumer and you need to send a crew to ISS, and you have multiple providers, what are going to be your discriminators as to which provider to choose?
I would say primarily the capabilities that they bring to bear and the cost. We'll have to decide in the terms of COTS cargo, it was in our best interest to have multiple providers in terms of the overall capability that they brought to brought to bear. We would do the same sort of analysis, I would think, for crew, trying to figure out what is in the best interest of NASA. And in terms of specific missions, it would depend on the capabilities of those providers. I do not foresee, if we have multiple providers, and that is our goal, and that is our hope, and we're working towards that, I would think it unlikely that they have exactly the same capability in terms of turnaround time, number of seats, cost. It's unlikely that they'll have exactly the same capability. So in certain instances, you know, one provider may perform a particular mission better than the other on an individual basis, but on a portfolio, might be better to have both. So I would say that sort of at a very high level and answer your question. Go ahead.
Maybe Alan could jump in here and talk about how the cargo services contracts were structured, and that may be somewhat of an analogy.
The way the cargo services evolved is, just as Phil said, our providers had different capabilities. In one case, a company is able to have an upmass and a downmass capability, whereas the other company we awarded to just had an upmass capability. So, of course, there are discriminators based on your mission needs. Of course, with commercial crew, this is more likely a per seat basis. But again, there will be different missions, there will be different needs, and I'm sure our selection will be optimized on the need. But in any case, it is always good to have multiple redundant capabilities to service crew transportation.
But Alan, in the cargo services, the CRS contract, there was a specific number of flights that were contracted for each provider. Is that correct?
Well, actually, it was a specific amount of cargo
okay.
that was contracted for, and then that decomposed
into a certain number of flights. Okay.
And I'd point out too is the launch services program, the NASA Launch Services contract, and how that's structured. That has a portfolio of launch vehicles available, and then depending on the mission, the payload, there's a selection done based on that portfolio. How does it play out long term? But it's similar in the sense of you're not, this will go back to, you're not buying the minivan to go transport 2 people necessarily. I mean, you want to fit the mission, the cost, the whole realm of the possibility. So see it probably progressing somewhere along that frame as it gets into a services time period.
And I would also see that, in the future, as Phil talked about, if you look at what we expect robust capability to be out in the future is other folks who want to get to the ISS or get to other locations, but for us, get to ISS and do science and do experiments. And then they very well may want to bring back some of their stuff in addition to themselves. And so if we have one capability that really is focused on bringing back up and down crew, another one that might be focused on maybe less crew and more capability to bring back stuff that might be related to the science, then we have a portfolio to use. And so that's one reason why a portfolio is good. Obviously competition, obviously it provides multiple ways to get to the same destination. So if one way gets in trouble, technically for whatever reason, one particular system can't fly that particular time, we have another system that can back that up.
Okay, thank you, Ed. A couple announcements before we conclude. A copy of today's presentation is available online at www.nasa.gov/exploration. And please click on the link to the Commercial Crew Planning Status Forum. It seems people have been, couldn't find it, so that's where it is. In approximately 1 week, we will post video from this morning's forum on the same website. And also remember that you can continue to submit questions online for another 2 hours. We will attempt to answer your questions, and we will post the questions and answers on the website. So thank you all for attending and for watching. Good day.